Is there a specific type of task or activities you really struggle with? For one reason or another, you just have to engage with them every so often, but they're incredibly daunting and repelling, and you just keep getting stuck in procrastination loops. You get this visceral feeling of powerlessness and aversion about the whole thing. You don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, and it's really hard to even try making any modicum of progress. And the issue is you don't have a choice but to work on it. And so the more you avoid doing it, the worse it keeps getting. What can be done in such a situation? Is there a way to make this whole ordeal more manageable and make some headway without too much suffering? Well, after being repeatedly faced with this type of situation in my previous work, I eventually realized that a massive factor behind this issue is a lack of familiarity and trust. Unfortunately, there are some more constructive ways to address these issues than procrastination or banging your head against a wall. And that's what we'll be talking about today. But first, I'd like to start by giving a few concrete examples so we can have a clear idea what we're talking about. So I think these types of situations are easier to spot in other people, right? Because they tend to feel comically excessive. So I'm sure you probably know at least one person out there who is perfectly smart and resourceful, but whenever it comes to technology, they just become completely helpless, right? So it's like maybe they have to deal with their phone or using their computer or printer or something, and it's not that hard. And if you read the manual, it's, anybody can do it, but they just have this massive block and they're terrified, and they're requesting help and they just feel like, oh, I can't do this, it's too complicated. Another example that's pretty common is people that get traumatized by school and they just have this, belief like, I'm bad at math. Anything that's slightly math related, even like basic computation, anything that's, vaguely associated with math, they'll just like give it a wide berth and, withdraw immediately. When in real, and technically, if they just put their mind to it and they had, decent guidance, they can probably be at least, okay with it. Maybe not brilliant, but fine. But the thing is, it's a lot harder when it's happening to us, right? Like some of these things, or some of these tasks or areas of life, we see other people doing them and they're not struggling, but it just feels like for us, it's not possible. There's like some weird universe magic that doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense emotionally to us. That it's just awful. We just can't do it. It's just terrifying. It's just black magic, and we just don't want to have to do anything with it. So in my case, I know I can struggle with this with social interactions with people I don't know well, or in like context I don't know well. But the one where I really needed to get better at it, to that forced me to actually figure some solutions, was when I was a developer working with a legacy code base. So basically, I'll try to keep it quick and simple. But when you're a programmer, most of your time is not, developing or writing code. It's actually reading code that already exists to understand how it works, and in order to fix it or add new stuff into it. And that can be pretty daunting. And I, for a long time, struggled to explain why it's daunting and unappealing to people I don't know that haven't had that experience. But I think I finally found a metaphor that kind of works decently to explain this to anyone. So imagine you're tasked with finding one specific document, okay, in a big archive room. But the problem is this archive room, it's unlabeled and undated. You just have big boxes everywhere, and inside the boxes you've got, wads and wads of documents. And there's like you don't have any help. They didn't write the dates or categories on the boxes. And it's huge, it's dark, and it's got bad lighting, it's damp, it's musky, it's like an old archive room, so it's filled with rotten paper dust and full of bacteria. And you're just going to have to, like make your way inside there. You have no idea where the thing you're looking for is, and it just feels overwhelming and just like gross. You don't want to have anything to do with this whole thing. So I think at its worst, trying to figure out legacy code base kind of is a similar experience to this. So maybe it'll help give you an idea what this can be like. And it'll help us when I kind of start addressing solutions after in later parts. But first, let's start by kind of trying to, understand what's really going on to diagnose the issue. and so in order to get an idea on how we can fix it. So as I said, familiarity is a big factor in this whole situation. But first, it's probably important to define what I mean by familiarity, right? So in this case, now in my case, it's maybe a little focused on intellectual or mental type of work, but I'm sure you can, shift it on another type of topic. But I'd say familiarity, in this context at least, I would define as the ability to visualize what the problem at hand is broadly made up of. Having a decent grasp on its interrelated components and being able to intuitively break it down into smaller subtasks and kind of eyeball where and how you should probably get started. Getting kind of a sense of where what you need to do, how it kind of fits together. A general sense of bearings. Like I kind of understand vaguely at least, but I feel kind of some basic level of like, yeah, I would probably do this. And so what happens when you don't have familiarity, right? If you have low familiarity, it feels very foreign and weird and dangerous and like, ugh. Well, then any task, even if it's actually pretty simple, will feel very overwhelming, right? And you'll have very low confidence in your ability to do it because you have no idea how to do it. It just feels so big, daunting, and scary. And so because of this overwhelm and low confidence, right, you're going to suck, especially if usually low familiarity is associated with the fact that you didn't have a lot of practice in this area, or maybe you just also maybe naturally struggle with it. It's not your biggest strengths. But so you're not going to be very good on the one hand, and on the other hand, you're going to experience a lot of resistance when it comes to doing it. Right? You gotta every part of your body is telling you like, oh no, let's not go anywhere near this thing. And so you get stuck in a vicious cycle of procrastination because you need to work on this thing, but you just like, oh, I suck, and then you feel this big resistance of like, well, I really don't want to do this. And so your mind finds a way to distract you, and you procrastinate. And then because you procrastinate, you never do any progress, you don't get any better, and you just stay stuck and you just keep getting worse. Because now, and also it's kind of building the case that you suck at this because you never make progress and it's always scary. And that's kind of another issue that factors into this whole thing is feedback loops and reinforcement, right? There's kind of this concept that the more you win, as in the better you get at something, the more confidence you build, and the easier it'll be to practice and get better. And so it kind of feeds into it. And a similar thing happens on a negative aspect, where the more you feel like you're going to suck, the lower your confidence. The lower your confidence, the worse you're probably likely to perform, which is going to reinforce your initial belief. And so it creates those self-fulfilling prophecies. There's like a psychology concept associated, it's related to this whole thing called the Pygmalion effect. You can look it up if you're interested. So basically, the main idea is that familiarity is important because it enables confidence, and in turn, this confidence enables us to make progress and build proficiency. If you feel safe, then you can practice and you can experiment, and that's how you're going to get better. And so that plays into this whole idea of feedback loops. And there's an associated idea, it's pretty famous. It's the concept of fixed and growth mindset by Carol Dweck. And the basic idea is that if you have a growth mindset, you tend to think that your performances in an area, actually, you can have, your mindset can shift depending on the task. So in one area of life, you might have a growth mindset, in another, you could have a fixed mindset. But when you have a growth mindset, you tend to think that your performances are based on skills that you can improve with time, and that challenges are opportunity for growth that they can help you steadily improve over time. Whereas when you have a fixed mindset about something, you tend to think that your performances are based on fixed and predetermined factors, and so you don't have much potential for improvement. If you fail, it just means your ability weren't good enough, and there's not much you can do about it, so you might as well give up. And, like if I quote/paraphrase a section in the book, Take Smart Notes by Sonke, Ahrens, I think that's how you pronounce his name, I'm not sure. He says that the most reliable predictor for long-term success is to actively seek and welcome feedback, be it positive or negative. And it just ties back into this whole idea. Now, I mean, I've seen some criticism of the whole idea of this fixed and growth mindset, but it's I think it's pretty self evident, or it kind of follows logically the whole thing I said previously about, when you have low confidence, you're going to do worse, and when you have higher confidence, you're usually going to do better, relatively. And I think another way to kind of think about this whole idea is well represented in the following quote of Dune by Frank Herbert that says, "For the others, we can say that Muad'Dib learned rapidly because his first training was in how to learn, and their first lesson of all was a basic trust that he could learn. It is shocking to find how many people do not believe they can learn, and how many more believe learning to be difficult. Muad'Dib knew that every experience carries its lesson." All right, so that's all nice theory and all, but how do we actually use this to get us out of problems? What's the actionable advice? And so what I'm going to tell you now, it kind of builds upon other videos I've made on this whole kind of my approach, we'll say, to discipline and productivity. So there was a video I made where I talked about the fact that discipline isn't really about willpower, but more about humility, of kind of understanding how you work and what is a reality as it stands currently, combined with foresight to kind of take into account what is true right now from the humility section, and build a plan that allows for success, so to speak, given those circumstances. And then there was another video on trudging along, which is basically the idea of being consistent with kind of trying to make progress, trying to work on things, even if you're not doing a great job, even if you kind of suck, even if it feels hopeless, you just do a little bit of work, a little bit consistently over time. And at some point, you'll eventually get some momentum and break through. Although, depending, it can be easier or not, depending on the type of techniques you use. But basically, this whole idea of basically the whole message of this video being that familiarity breeds progress, breeds headway, is kind of another layer on top of trudging along. It's kind of a thing to keep in mind when you use this concept of trudging along, of making a little bit of progress slowly but consistently. And so really, I think it's a mindset shift. The idea is that the first priority, the first order of business, should be to warm up to your environment and to find your bearings instead of obsessing about getting results instantly. I think that's a real killer, is that when you expect that as soon as you get started with this new activity that's super unfamiliar and daunting for you, that you're going to get results. If that's what you're expecting, you're going to be instantly disappointed, and you're just going to keep feeding the vicious loop of misery. So nurturing familiarity is a prerequisite to nurturing efficiency, and it's really important, and shouldn't underestimate this part, and you should give it space, and you should be lenient with yourself and be strategic about nurturing familiarity. Growing familiar with a project or a type of activity is making progress towards its completion, instead of perfectionism and like stunted or disproportionate expectations, which are only going to really hinder you. So, and to be more specific about types of techniques you can use, another video I did recently was about the whole idea of kind of the 4 steps, what I believe to be the 4 main steps of introspection/inquiry, which are regrouped in the acronym SEEK, for spot, externalize, examine, and knit. So this can kind of help in this process, because you're kind of trying to figure out something out, or trying to understand how something works, and these 4 steps can help, so you might want to check out that video. But especially in this case, the externalizing and examining and knitting parts. So by externalizing, a lot of it in this case, and what really helped me, is writing down your thought process and kind of mapping out what is happening. So let's take my example of legacy code bases and my, finding this document in an archive metaphor. First off, another technique I mentioned in other videos is Pomodoro can really help you. So Pomodoro is just a simple timer technique where you just commit for 25 minutes. Well, I mean, it can be another duration, but the default of 25 minutes is good. For 25 minutes, you'll just work on something. You don't need to be good, right? You'll just do a serious effort to work on something. Even if you completely suck, that's fine. You still did the job. You just have to focus on it without distractions and be serious for the duration of time. And another good thing about Pomodoro is that it includes breaks. So you should, be consistent and disciplined about the work and then the breaks. And another thing that can really help is to try to prevent any distractions when you're doing your Pomodoro. So focus mode on apps and your computer, kind of like disabling notifications, like do not disturb mode, etc. All this types of stuff really helps. So don't make it harder for yourself. So that's the first step, kind of, putting the temporal environment available that will help you make progress and get familiar with stuff. And then the second step, as I said, is documenting. So that would kind of combine the externalize and examine steps I mentioned previously. But basically, you want to write down your questions and as you go, and then answers and procedures when you figure out the answers. So if we use this archive example, right? Since there's no labeling, the first thing you need to do is kind of get your bearings to an extent. I mean, first thing to do is to focus on your well-being and your environment. So you probably want to, maybe not get a hazmat suit, but at least, like a gas mask and some clothes that can get dirty, because you're going to be a while in there and, you might get dirty and you don't want to breathe bad stuff. That's probably a good first idea, kind of take your environment into consideration. Then the second step is you need to start kind of bringing some order into this whole mess. So you probably need to open a first box, kind of look inside the contents. Now, depending on the level of evil of the person that designed this archive room, is probably most of the documents within a box are probably going to be relevant or associated to in some way. So you can flip through a few documents, you can get an idea of the type of document and the dates ranges, vaguely at least, and then you can start labeling each box and start kind of mapping out the archive. And even if you don't find the specific document you're looking for right away, it might take a long time. At least it's still productive. You're kind of getting to grips with the whole thing, and then next time someone needs to get something in those archives, your work will help a lot, because now you've done this whole process. It won't need to be done again. So outside from our metaphor, writing down these questions and then the answers when you figure them out, and how things are working, and how you can like certain techniques that work or ways you've fixed the problem. You write it down. You're like, okay, I did this and this and this. That really helps. Another thing that helps is the more you start understanding what's going on, you can start drafting a to-do list for yourself. Okay, so I'll need to do this, then I'll need to do that, then I'll need to do this. And then following a to-do list is not too overwhelming, especially once you've kind of mapped out the territory in your head. It's like, oh, I'm starting to get an idea of how I can do this. And then you can actually make progress. And then once you do this for enough time, you'll start unlocking momentum, and you won't need as much training wheels, right? Although don't hesitate to fall back on them when you do need them. Pride, denial, and distorted expectations are surefire ways to tank your productivity. But this technique, kind of the general framework, really works if you do it seriously. That's the hardest part, is getting yourself to actually follow those steps. But in my case, it really helped when I was struggling with, having to dive into legacy code. Doing this helped me actually get stuff done. And, I had to, because I had deadlines when I was supposed to give my work. So, I had to work on them. But I struggled with procrastination for a long time. And putting these techniques into practice helped me be less disastrous, at least. So in conclusion, remember to start with small steps, small enough that you can sustain a frequent practice, that you can work on something frequently, and it's not too hard. To quote a video by Ali Abdaal, he has this idea of you need to lower the bar until you can maintain consistency. And so your first objective when you work on a daunting project or a task is to get the feeling, oh, this is starting to make sense. I think I can do this. That should be your first order of business, not to become a prodigy on the first try. That's never going to happen, and you're just shooting yourself in the foot if that's the way you're thinking about this. I think the following snippet from the song Clint Eastwood by Gorillaz kind of encapsulates the general idea. It goes, feeling sensation that you thought was dead, no squealing, and remembers that it's all in your head. In this case, the whole fear, the overwhelmingness, the dauntingness is, in part kind of in your head. You're kind of making it worse than it really is. And your mindset impacts how it feels, right? Like if you think it's going to be awful, you're going to make it more awful than it needs to be. And then it goes, I ain't happy, I'm feeling glad, I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, but not for long, the future is coming on. And those last two sentences, I'm useless, but not for long, the future is coming on, is kind of the gist of this idea of building familiarity. Well, you're useless right now, but if you keep doing these steps, if you keep trudging along, you won't be useless that long. I mean, you might never get great, but you can get, survivable levels at least. Anyways, I hope you appreciated this video, you got something out of it. I did similar, or I approached similar topics in other videos that I mentioned, so the video on discipline isn't willpower, the video on trudging along, and the video on kind of getting clarity of self and purpose through introspection and the SEEK acronym. So if you're interested in any of these topics, feel free to check them out. In any case, thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this, and see you in another video.